หัวอัปเดตในวันนี้นะคะจะพาคุณผู้ชมไปติดตามการพูดคุยกันกับนักวิเคราะห์นะคะเกี่ยวกับทิศทางของค่าเงินดอลลาร์ว่าช่วงนี้จะเป็นอย่างไรแล้วก็มีปัจจัยอะไรบ้างที่ต้องจับตามองพูดคุยกันในวันนี้นะคะกับมิสเตอร์ศักดิ์เทนดีสุภาอัตซึ่งก็เป็น Executive Vice President นะคะ Head FX Research and Strategy Global Market มาลายัน Banking เบอร์ฮาร์ดเดี๋ยวเราไปติดตามกันได้เลยค่ะ Good afternoon, Mr. Saktiandi. Thank you very much for joining us. So today we'll be talking about the outlook of the FX movement. So the first question I would like to ask is about the dollar movement. What is your view on that for this year?
I think our general view, let's start off with a general trajectory. For the end of the year, we're expecting the dollar to actually be slightly weaker towards 86 level on a dollar index perspective. On a bilateral perspective, it depends against which currencies you're talking about. But generally, a few reasons why the dollar should be slightly softer, in my view, for the remainder of the year towards the end of the year.
That is the most important factor that would drive dollar.
Typically, it would drive dollar. And
then,
at the same time, fiscal policy. Under the Trump administration, it's a fiscal expansionary policy together with Bush and Reagan in the past. Typically, when there's an expansionary fiscal policy, this is also another important factor. With fiscal expansion where you spend a bit more, you tend to see the dollar tend to be weighed down a bit because typically it flushes out the money supply and typically tends to sort of soften the currency market. So in that sense, the dollar tends to be a bit weighed down. So those the top key factors, I would say first would be the growth, second would be the fiscal expansionary policy, third would be those binding structural fiscal, not fiscal but foreign exchange reserves usage, and also in terms of payment settlements. Those are more structural global usage of the dollar.
How about the volatility of the dollar comparing to last year with this year?
The variability, I think it's probably will be a bit more volatile in some ways this year from a dollar perspective.
Yes.
It has a tendency probably this year because typically also because of the change in the Fed governor. People were a bit concerned whether he might be a bit more hawkish or dovish. But I would say that aside, I think fundamentals of the US is actually one thing that we want to look out for, the growth momentum and see whether the dollar would actually move around during the FOMC and the run up to PCE, core data, core inflation data, and also around inflation data. I think we want to look at those as the key thing. My view is I think inflation is the key. Any inflation rearing its head might be clear indicators of markets, I think, shifting around those points.
We are now in between the period where we transforming from the Goldilocks period to the monetary policy where it's tightening more, where the Fed started to rise the rate and everything. Could you tell us like what's happening and how does this impact the currency in general and in the overall picture?
So maybe I'll paint a picture of two scenarios. Goldilocks will be one. Like we've seen that neither too hot, neither too warm, everything is nice, growth momentum continues. The pace of inflation is not too fast, just nice. In that sort of scenario that we're seeing now, the dollar is a bit softer. Carry trades, those looking for high yield currencies going into Asia, ASEAN, going into Indonesia, IDR, Malaysia, Thai baht continues. So currencies in emerging market Asia will benefit from that, those carry trade and yields. In particular Thai baht, for example, Thailand, for example, with its real yield being significantly higher than US, given that the inflation, Thai inflation is actually quite soft, lower compared to even in the region. So that's a Goldilocks environment. So those are the currencies that may benefit. So those that may not benefit would be dollar and maybe yen to some extent as well, because it's not seen as a risky sort of environment per se. But if situations like concerns of inflationary pressures coming on stream leads to FOMC concerns that FOMC will start hiking rates more than what markets are already pricing in. So maybe they're expecting the rates might go up to 3 or 4 hikes or 5 hikes. The expectation build up in the market. Markets start to build up that and tends to go into the FX markets via the dollar. So dollar might tend to strengthen. So when they strengthen as well, it affects other currencies. Unraveling of some of these carry trades might come on stream. So that happened before, in the run-up to the FOMC announcement and before Powell's conference remarks and things like that. So the key thing here is, in that situation, the markets reprice for a faster pace of appreciation in the hikes, and as a result led to a US dollar appreciation. But I just want to highlight that in that sort of situation where monetary policy tightening is expected to pick up pace, there could be a second phase inside that sort of scenario, where markets price in. As long as there's growth momentum, industrial production starts to continues to be there, market starts to price in, maybe the market will be able to absorb the fact that the hikes are coming in and priced it in already. But as long as growth continues to be there, and if that sort of situation builds into the market, into sentiment and signaling, eventually the dollar will soften back again.
And how about the currency that would be sensitive to certain factors, for example, the equity, the rates, and also the oil price as well?
So for those that are sensitive to interest rates, for example, I think in particular in the G10 space, probably it will be the Aussie dollar, Kiwi, and Korean won. Those are currencies probably the most sensitive to a rate hike, and also in terms of FX, and also in terms of the bond yields relative to the rate hikes as well. Indonesian rupiah could come into the fray when you add equity in as well. The least vulnerable one is probably renminbi, and for rate hikes, Thai baht also is actually sensitive, one of the lesser sensitive in terms of to a rate hike as well at this juncture, or compared to data over the past 2 years.
So in year 2018, in your point of view, which currency would be the most volatile currency in ASEAN region? Which country or which currency would be the most weakened currency in the ASEAN and strengthened currency in the ASEAN region as well?
If you look at the trajectory for this year, like I mentioned just now, risk factors for inflationary pressures would be one key thing. And so as a result, I highlighted just now which currencies are most vulnerable to interest rate hikes. Most vulnerable to bond and equity would be one. So if you look at that space, in the G10 it would be Aussie, Kiwi and Korean won. In the ASEAN space, the closest to that quadrant or exposure would be closer towards IDR, which is more sensitive to equities, and also to some extent Sing dollar would fluctuate to that extent as well. So those two currencies are more exposed to the equity and rate hike stuff. The others in ASEAN may be affected as well, but not as much as those two. The other extreme currency I thought would be most vulnerable would be peso to some extent. It depends on also whether the central bank will start hiking rates or move in the interim. If they don't, there could be some repercussions in terms of softness on the peso front. So we would be cautious on the IDR, peso, and to some extent Sing dollar.